Chapter 2. Images raced through my mind hard and fast.
Sentenced to execution for the crime of denying the sovereignty of the Summer Queen.
I waved away the proponents of the trial.
You can't do this, you bastard.
The female rebel was dragged off to be slaughtered.
Sentenced to execution again for the crime of lambasting a royal prince. Take this woman away.
The dragon tried to take flight, instinct, nothing more. Its wings had been shredded by my blade, it was helpless and I was going to kill it. As the dragon crashed down loudly, I pulled steel to kill it.
You have no honor, elven trash.
As the dragon struck at me in desperation, I killed it. Another bad scene. Another bad scene. I was reeling, judged by Danny and found brutally guilty. Distantly I heard Digi's voice.
Ted. Break the eye contact, shake tie a little bit or something.
They tried, but Danny, seemingly as helpless as I was in whatever this was, grabbed my wrist and forced my eyes to stay locked with hers with her thin hands. I was galloping across the plains of Faerie, a death sentence at my back for refusing the marriage to the Duchess, and the unknown life of an exile ahead of me. There was a strange blue tent of weird material staked out obscenely on the green grass of the plain. I wasn't being pursued and I reined up my horse to quietly watch from a distance. Night was falling, but I could still see just fine. Obviously, the camper could not, as he emerged bearing a strange torch that didn't flicker. I sat in Palawa's saddle and watched, out of helpless curiosity until the traveler bedded down.
Come with me if you want to live.
I wheeled my horse around, facing the confused man, gripping tightly to a magic blade he didn't even know how to use. I was on my way out, given a day to get out of Faerie before my own mother would put a kill notice on me. But this man was in much deeper trouble than me. He put up a hand and grabbed at some way to mount up with me. I grabbed his arm and yanked him up easily, slinging him up behind me in Palawa's saddle. Behind us, Summer Court guards were in hot pursuit. I dug my heels in Palawa's side and galloped off. As we tore across the land of Faerie, I called back to my passenger.
Why by the old magics are you here? My daughter.
He was obviously not too proud to hold on, having slung his arms around my waist and held on for dear life as Palawas galloped at full stride. His grip was tight enough to choke my much smaller elven frame.
She was taken?
I checked behind us, and it looked like the guards had given up. After the next hillock, I'd rein up Palawas and slow down. I was the only one who could cross the fairy circle. It would hurt like 5 kinds of hell, but I had to do it. I didn't hesitate.
Ted, Loro the Thar. Keep the fairies back.
The dragon prince rumbled.
Get the child.
I tossed aside my blade and walked across the circle's line. It didn't hurt, didn't even faze me as I picked up the infant. She giggled and stretched her little hands up to me, eyes burning fey blue. While I was fascinated with her eyes, my companions had bigger problems. The Winter Queen wanted us all dead and had backup with many warriors around her. Ted abandoned the front lines.
Danny.
We switched things we were holding, I handed him his daughter, he handed me Cendalus. I pulled steel and prepared to fight for our lives. Escape was going to be a hard battle. Then Loro the Thar whirled, sweeping his bladed tail and slaughtering the fairies who were trying to kill us. He reared up and slammed his mass into a wall, crumbling the ancient stone.
On my back, we shall escape this place.
Ted and I lost no time. I sheathed Sendalus and clambered up on the dragon's back. Loro the Thar took wing and we were away, leaving furious fairies shooting arrows that came far short as the dragon gained altitude and winged away east towards the spring and the sunrise. I cleared the room and called out.
Mindy! You're safe, my name is Lane and the bad man can't hurt you anymore.
I opened the closet and found Mindy Wallace, as she crawled out. I holstered my service pistol and picked her up.
You're okay, sweetie, you're safe, I'm a policeman.
Finally, after a complete grand jury indictment of my life, Danny and I were able to let go of each other. Disraeli was pressed up against me as he eased me down on the couch.
Personal space, Digi.
I muttered weakly, then I placed a hand to my forehead and moaned. Having your best and worst moments slammed through your head in fast forward is kind of painful. Ted was gripping Donnie's arms, rubbing them as he spoke.
Danny! Look at me!
She shook her head, seemingly as stunned and confused as I was.
Dad! Danny, yes, it's me. What the hell happened there?
Disraeli and Damien and slipped away from us and were paging through books, muttering between themselves. Danny shook her head and hesitantly spoke.
I saw things. Things Tierras Fedurhani has done, everything he's done. It was like...
Danny was struggling to explain what we had shared when we had made eye contact. Then it hit me, and I prayed they hadn't noticed. That Danny had used my full given name. Whatever had happened between us, that slip of a teenage girl had seen my soul. Damien looked up from an ancient-looking book of enchantments.
Danielle, was it like Ghost Rider, you saw that movie?
She nodded slowly.
You shouldn't be watching R-rated movies. Was it like The Penance Stare?
Donnie's eyes widened.
Yeah, just like that.
She had her feet under her more as her brain re-engaged. Damien went back to the book he held. Disraeli peered over his shoulder and added commentary.
You can't possibly be right, the fairies and the elves got together to kill those women over 1500 years ago. As your powering demon, I think you're barking up a tree. The wrong one, that is.
Damien pointed to the book.
I think it's pretty clear. She looked into the eyes of an elf and saw all the evil he had done.
Danny looked at me.
But not anymore. You aren't the same person you were.
Damien was reading and talking at the same time.
That probably saved his life. If he was still your average elven bastard, he would have died after her judgment. Or maybe not, they aren't as powerful when the group is splintered. Wait a minute there, Damien.
I forced myself to sit up.
You cannot be saying what I think you're saying. There's spells, and things, and other stuff. They can't come back.
Damien raised an eyebrow.
They can't come back in fairy. I believe the exact wording of the fourth Summer Queen's spell didn't include the mortal realm.
I had to defend my distant ancestors' tactics.
It was over 1,000 years ago, humans were practically shaking bone rattles compared to us.
Ted was confused.
Would somebody please explain this to me? I am fucking tired of being cut out of the loop.
Damien was the one to say it, as he clutched one of his heavy tomes.
Disraeli, and I believe your daughter is the reincarnation of one of the three goddesses of the Morgan, Mr. Lawrence.
Digi piped in.
Possibly Nemain, Donnie's age now that this is coming to a head is a clue. When the fairies failed 15 years ago, they had to wait until the age of blossoming to try again. You mean my daughter is some kind of ancient goddess?
Damien laid the book down, open to the account of the slaying of the Morgan by the Fae.
Long ago, the fair folk were just the same way as they've been for millennia, the biggest bastards in the universe. The only difference was that there was someone who could pass judgment on the Fae for their actions. The Morgan was one functional entity made up of three goddesses, Nemain, Maka, and Bab. They had the powers to judge and punish the Fae for their actions against mortals. After thousands of years of this, the elves and fairies allied for the only time in history and brought their most powerful sorcerers and best warriors together and set out to kill the Morgan.
Disraeli piped in.
They succeeded, and the shaded world went to all to hell and has been there ever since. Now, well, Danny, I hate to say it, but your life is not yours.
Danny was very quiet. Then she said,
I saw this on an episode of Sanctuary.
As everybody digested the fact that we were likely in the presence of a girl who was, for anything of the shaded world, judge, jury, and executioner, Damien spoke.
You know, everybody's been through a lot, how about we all try to get some sleep?
Digirelli nodded enthusiastically.
That's an awesome idea. I sleep with you.
Damien just gave him a look.
I helped you this time.
Digi grumbled.
Crap. You're sure you don't need something, a little extra magic, money, fortune's favor?
Damien crossed his arms and said smugly.
Nope, I'm good, actually.
Digi grumbled and shifted, from his normal straight gay appearance into a devastatingly beautiful woman. Digirelli stomped up the stairs. Before she disappeared, she yelled down the grand staircase.
I'll be in your room. Tearing up the sheets. Jackass.
I looked at Damien.
I'd prefer Digirelli and I'm not even gay.
You see, Digi gets irritated when he's forced to his succubus incarnation.
She's funner this way.
He clapped his hands and servants came into the room as quickly as if they had been just outside the doors of Damien's library.
Show my guests to their rooms, please.
A young maid addressed me as Damien took the stairs 2 at a time.
Right this way, detective.
In the revelations of what we thought we had learned about Danny, I hadn't even realized my gun and my badge were still on my belt. I unclipped them and cleared the pistol as I followed the maid upstairs. The room was as elegantly appointed as any place in Damien Van Wallever's home. His dealings with demons had made him a very wealthy man. The maid laid out pajamas and gestured toward a small wicker basket by the door.
Just put your clothes in there and they'll be washed and pressed by the morning, sir. Thanks, you want me to fold them, or something?
I wasn't used to having people waiting on me. My clothes usually lay on my bedroom floor until I motivate myself to pick them up and wash them.
Oh, no, that's not necessary, sir.
She curtsied, she actually curtsied and pointed at the call button on the wall.
If you need anything, just push the button and someone will assist you.
She left the room quietly, and I took off the cloths I'd been wearing and dropped them in the basket as I walked into the suite's shower. Pajama and slipper clad, I couldn't sleep. I had put my police credentials and gun in a nightstand drawer and was sitting up on the side of the bed. The encounter with Danny was still on my mind. I had looked into the eyes of God and been judged. But I was still alive, though I didn't feel like I deserved to be. Mindy Wallace had been my first big case, a kidnapped child, and I was lead detective when I had been assigned to missing persons. I had still been strongly elf, using a glamour to appear human. That, 10 years after I had been banished, was really the moment I had had to kill my fey morals, and put finding the girl over slaughtering the kidnapper. He got away to Mexico, but Mindy was safe. Making a human decision had accelerated my own decay, but it had been worth it. I laid back down and tried to sleep. The tip of my blade touched the stonework. Loro the Thar turned to face the Winter Queen. Ted was curled in pain on the floor, just outside of, but completely outside of, the fairy circle. The infant was screaming as the Queen raised her arms.
You will all now die for your arrogance.
Loro the Thar roared.
Not bloody luckily, you fairy bitch. Tiaras, the child.
As Loro the Thar lunged at the Queen, I knew this was going to hurt. I was the only one who could cross the fairy circle. It would hurt like 5 kinds of hell, but I had to do it. I didn't hesitate.
Ted, Loro the Thar. Keep the fairies back.
The Dragon Prince rumbled.
Get the child.
Trying to avoid tripping the circle's spell, I laid aside my sword and crossed it, expecting pain. There was nothing, and I grabbed the baby up from the crib, comforting her frightened crying. The Winter Queen screeched as I turned around, holding the baby. She lost all interest in my companions and threw a bolt of magic lightning at me. Loro the Thar shook the stonework as he put his great bulk between me and the Queen. The magic rebounded on his hide and struck the Winter Queen. She screamed in pain as she fell smoking to the stones. Ted abandoned the front lines.
Danny.
We switched things we were holding. I handed him his daughter, he handed me Sendalus. I pulled steel and prepared to fight for our lives. Escape was going to be a hard battle. Then Lorothar whirled, sweeping his bladed tail and slaughtering the fairies who were trying to kill us and safeguard their queen's body at the same time. As we had escaped, I looked back where Ted had one arm tightly around me, the other gripping his daughter. The tiny infant, completely nonplussed at being hundreds of feet off the ground and on a dragon's back, was giggling. Her fey blue eyes shone brightly. I looked at Ted.
Are you sure your wife was human?
He looked down at his daughter, obviously seeing her eyes closely for the first time since the rescue had begun in earnest.
They weren't like that before, they were brown.
I tried to rest his mind.
It's just because she was taken to fairy, it happens. She'll be fine.
As he hugged his daughter to him, I decided not to tell him his own eyes had turned silver. The sound of rampaging elephants outside the room woke me long before dawn's light did. I thrashed out of the bed and grabbed my gun from the nightstand drawer, jammed a magazine of iron bullets in and snapped the bolt forward to load it. Bursting out of the room, pandemonium had broken out and nobody else realized it yet. Goblin warriors were pouring through the front door, led by the horned one on his nightmare. Perversely, I felt happy that I could see him. The horse reared as the horned one gave orders to the warriors.
Kill anything human, take Nemane alive.
The rest of the household was rousing, if the slamming of doors and the shouted confusion was any indicator. Ted Lawrence ran into me, and both of us ended up on the floor. He had strapped Sendalus on, but hadn't even pulled steel yet. Wanting to beat him senseless, I shoved my gun at him. We switched our weapons, he checked my gun as he took it and I slung Sendalus' scabbard on my back and drew the blade.
The bullets are iron, it should do enough harm to the horned one to stagger him, and the goblins aren't particularly vulnerable to it, but it's still a bullet and they are mortal.
Ted nodded and we disentangled from each other, and managed to get down the stairs without getting in each other's way. Damien was busy trading hot spells with the horned one, and Digirelli was riding a conjured horse, slaughtering goblins like nobody's business. Or rather, Dejiro was slaughtering goblins, while wearing a lace teddy and yelling at Damien.
How by all the hells of the underworld did they get in here? I said my study was warded, not the entire house. Tiaras. Watch Danny. Like hell.
Ted had already headed for the study, and Danny was visible running too. Only she wasn't running for the study. Ted realized this and yelled at his daughter.
Danny. You get in there right now.
The goblins fleeing from one spell-slinging sorcerer and one blood-crazed incubus focused on me, they, apparently, human target. The boldest came at me gibbering and screaming. Being bold in battle is a bad idea, I cut them down without hesitating, while trying to get Sendalus to work to its full potential. The blade was not cooperating, so I could only use it for what it was, a very sharp elven blade. Its magic was probably just as depleted as mine. The horned one charged his nightmare forward at Damien, calling out a challenge in undecipherable ancient fairy. As Damien was quickly cobbling together a defensive spell, Danny yanked away from where her father was trying to drag into the study while he shot goblins.
Danny!
She ran from him, into the thick of battle. Cursing under my breath, I headed towards her. I was halfway there when Danny planted herself right between the horned one and Damien. As he raised his blade, Danny spoke. I was close enough now to see her better, her eyes were burning bright blue, beyond the icy blue of the Fae. And I knew it wasn't really Danielle Lawrence speaking.
By the powers of the Morgan, by the goddesses Bad, Maka, and Nemane, you are banished to whence you've come, Win Ap Nud.
The horned one stopped dead, facing someone who wasn't afraid to say his true name. His blade dropped to the marble floor of the big entry hall, and the nightmare started to fade away first. As the horse disappeared, the horned one futilely reached for the blade on the floor, but couldn't pick it up. Soon he was fading too, and then he was gone like he had never been there. The goblins, realizing their leader was gone, retreated fast, gibbering and screaming as they flooded back out onto the wide avenue that the Van Walliver mansion crouched on. Dejira and Ted pursued, Digi running on demonic bloodlust and Ted running on false bravery created by a retreating enemy. In all the commotion, as Damien was busy trying to banish individual goblins faster than Ted and Dejira could slay them, Danny was unnoticed on the floor, laying still and staring at the ceiling in awe.
Danny.
I sheathed Sandalus and ran towards her. She sat up, facing me.
Tierras Fey Durhani.
She stood up, her eyes had faded back to their normal Fey blue, if that color of blue on a human girl could be called normal.
Do you remember what you did?
I expected her not to, but she nodded.
I banished him, he's not supposed to be here. Was I wrong? Something told me to do that.
The Winter Queen would not be happy when she got this report, and fully realized how badly the 7th Winter Queen, her mother, had screwed the pooch with Danny Lawrence.
No, Danny, you weren't wrong. But the Winter Court will be more desperate than ever to kill you now, you've manifested your first acts as the Morgan. I know, but you and Dad will protect me.
She seemed certain of that, as Ted and Dejira came back in the house. I wished I could guarantee the faith she had in us. It was very late, and we agreed to an early conference in the study. At least, they agreed to an early conference. I had a job to go to in the morning. I collapsed on the bed and cleared my pistol before putting it back in the nightstand drawer. Ted had no trigger discipline and had used all my iron bullets. I would have to go by the house as soon as possible and get more. I laid down and tried to get back to sleep. Loro the Thar back-winged and landed gracefully in the courtyard of the Spring Palace. Ted clambered off first, clutching his daughter awkwardly as he reached the ground. I dismounted behind him and faced the Spring Queen. The massive she-dragon sat up from where she had been squatting on her haunches as she thumped necks with her rescued son before addressing us.
Who be you, strangers?
The Queen was large and powerful, half again as big as her son Loro the Thar. I bowed deeply to the Queen. Ted awkwardly followed my example with the baby in his arms.
I am Tierras Fey Durhani, Prince of the Summer Court, now exiled. And, I'm Theodore Lawrence, Ted mostly. I was here for my daughter, he helped me get her back, and your son, too, Your Majesty.
The Queen rumbled.
For freeing my son Loro the Thar from the Winter Queen, I thank you both, Tierras Fey Durhani and Theodore Lawrence. You are welcome to all the hospitality of the Spring Court and the dragons of my lands.
Ted was confused, not sure what to say. I bowed again.
With respect, lady, we both acknowledge your graciousness, but this man needs to return to the mortal plane.
The Queen nodded her great head.
I see, yes, Theodore, you are human. You and your hatchling cannot stay here. And you, Tierras, our benighted cousin the Summer Queen has banished you. Even in the dwarven realms of our cousin the Autumn King you would not be safe.
I bowed my head and nodded.
We ask a boon, your help to go to the...
I choked on the words. After one last great fight, I was really leaving Fairy,
mortal plane.
The Queen threw her head and trumpeted to the sky above her. Within minutes, winging in above us, half again as large as his queen, and twice as large as his son, the Spring King landed and folded his wings. The Queen bowed her wings and forelegs.
My lord, these warriors have rescued our royal son Prince Loro the Thar, and ask a boon of transit to the mortal realm.
The Spring King lowered his head to look at us, dwarfing most of his subjects. Dragons decide rulership by who is the largest and the toughest of the senior adult males, and he chooses a mate of the largest and toughest females. It generally causes dragon leadership to get bigger and bigger over time.
Are you ready to travel, warriors?
Ted adjusted his grip on his baby.
Yes, I think so.
I bowed.
We are ready to travel at your convenience, Lord.
The King nodded.
Normally, I would insist on a feast for your bravery against the Winter Queen. Under the circumstances, we shall travel at once.
I was up and getting dressed when the maid knocked on the door.
Are you dressed, Detective Michaels?
I checked myself and called out,
Yeah, I'm decent.
She walked in.
Sergeant Charlie Jameson is at the door for you. He said you're definitely not late, but that he had never seen Mr. Van Wallaver's house and believed you didn't have your car. It's still in the police parking lot.
I buttoned my shirt, clipped on my gun and badge and followed the maid out of the room. Jameson was standing on the same marble foyer where I had slayed about a half-dozen goblins last night. It was unreal, really. He looked up as I descended the steps.
You look like crap, and you even slept in a fucking mansion last night? Long night.
I wasn't about to tell Jameson about what had really happened.
The me wants to talk to you urgently about the North River floater.
I really didn't have time for this.
Just drop me at the precinct, I'll clock in and head for the county morgue.
We both got into Jameson's Ford and drove away from the Van Wallaver mansion.
You sure you don't need some time off? I can transfer your cases to Smecky's. Smecky's? You're fucking kidding me.
I was laid back in the passenger seat.
He's an idiot. He's also the next most senior homicide detective below you. True, he's still an idiot.
I laid a hand over my eyes as we turned east into the bright sun. At the precinct, I checked in and was heading right back to my Torino when Steele waylaid me on the steps.
Michaels. Lieutenant. You're heading to the morgue. Yeah. Forewarned. We got an ID on the North River floater. Robert Turnells, 32 years old. Missing persons checked their files and they're rustling up the next of kin. Considering how long that guy had been in the river, I doubt anybody missed him.
I walked to my car, with Steele calling at my back.
You gotta do the notification. Get me a next of kin and I will, Lieutenant.
Strom was waiting for me in the lobby, with a file.
Robert Turnells, 32 years old. How was the ID made? Managed to recover fingerprints, and his personal effects washed up, a patrolman found them and turned them in. He has a record for a variety of grand and petty larceny. Grand theft auto, some cons, typical low-life punk who probably got killed by one of his acquaintances.
Thanks. I followed Strom Bloodaxe into the morgue proper. Robert Turnells was laid out on a slab, the white sheet folded down. He had been autopsied and sewed back up.
Cause of death wasn't the drowning, Your Highness. I extracted a nasty little gadget from his chest.
Strom handed me a kidney bowl, that had 3 9mm bullets in it, deformed from penetrating flesh.
He did drown, but the bullets were the catalyst. Looks to me like he fell in after being shot, instead of tossed or pushed. No bruising, no sign of hard impact with the water. Find the gun that matches the bullets. You'll probably have your killer.
Strom pulled the blanket back over the body. With the ME's report in hand, I went back to the precinct and tossed the folder down with the one for Lunara. After what Danny had done to the Horned One, I was pretty sure he was done for the foreseeable future, and Lunara's case would go cold. Steele shoved a printout at me from behind.
Next of kin for the North River floater. Diana Turnells, 29, his wife.
I hate this part of the job the most. I took the information and smiled wanly. Thanks. The Turnells lived in a row house only a mile upriver from where he had washed ashore. This made me suspicious. His wife had reported him missing 3 weeks ago, and never pursued it after that. Either there was no love left in that marriage, or she knew he wouldn't be found, at least not alive. I parked the Gran Torino on the curb and made sure my car was locked as I left it to walk up to the dilapidated house. The door opened when I was halfway up the walk. The woman who stood there looked like life had treated her hard, her eyes were grey as bedrock stone, and looked like they were carved from it. She eyed the gun and badge on my belt.
You a cop? You Mrs. Robert Turnells.
Two could play this game, and I wasn't feeling very polite. I gritted my teeth and tried to start over as she turned around and waved me into the house.
Yeah, I'm Diana Turnells. Detective Lane Michaels, I'm from Missing Persons or Homicide.
She seemed very resigned to the possibility of her husband being dead.
Homicide, Mrs. Turnells. Your husband was found on the North River's bank about a mile downriver. He's dead, ma'am.
She struck a cigarette and opened her door.
Come on in.
She handed me a cup of coffee.
How did he die? 3 gunshots to the abdomen, he was probably dead of the gunshot wounds before he could drown, Mrs. Turnles. I'm so sorry for your loss, and the police department is doing everything we can to find your husband's killer.
She got up abruptly and walked toward a creaky staircase. I stood up.
Mrs. Turnles. Just stay there a few minutes, detective. I'll be right back.
I waited, a little tense and not knowing what she was bringing back. That was when all hell broke loose upstairs. I heard screams and the unmistakable blasts of magic being thrown around. I ran for the stairs and was promptly knocked down when Mrs. Turnles barreled past me screaming. The goblins were in pursuit, and I heard a voice that made my blood run cold.
How dare you run from a queen of the fairies? Come back here and die, mortal.
In the mortal realm, she had ended up petite, only standing about 4 foot tall, and coldly beautiful. She was young for being the Winter Queen, but considering her mother had died 15 years ago, she must have been older than she looked. And I had no iron. Diana Turnles was already out the door, and I followed that example, as the Winter Queen flung magic at us from the house. The only car present was mine, and she wasted no time crashing into my driver's door and pulling a Slim Jim out of her clothes.
Oh, for God's sakes! I have a key.
She stopped and turned around, making the Slim Jim disappear back where it had come from as I grabbed my car keys out of pocket and set a personal best for unlocking, getting in and starting the Torino's engine. She jumped into the passenger seat and we were out of there, with goblins and the Winter Queen in pursuit before they gave up. My North River floater was definitely tied to the rest of what was going on.
What the hell were those?
Mrs. Turnles shrieked as we were safely away.
You could see them?
I questioned as I drove.
Yes, I could see them, a bunch of ugly little men and a kid throwing blasts of something around.
I told her the truth.
The ugly little men were goblins, and the kid was the Winter Queen, ruler of the fairies. The 8th Winter Queen to be exact, though that won't be used commonly until she dies and there's a new Winter Queen. Her mother was the 7th Winter Queen.
Mrs. Turnles was struck speechless as I took her back to the precinct. I was pretty sure if she was deciding if one or both of us was crazy. Finally, she decided that she wasn't crazy, and so I probably wasn't. There was no rational explanation, so she went with my irrational one.
Okay, so if a sparkly little fairy tried to kill me, what should I do, clap or something? Run.
I parked the Gran Torino and got out of the car.
I'm just going to get a statement from you about the last time you saw Mr. Turnles alive, Mrs. Turnles, and then we'll figure something out.
She smiled at me, and her stone-grey eyes seemed to soften before me.
Call me Diana.
I brought her inside and led her to my desk. Steels was on us immediately.
Michaels, you busy?
I gestured at Diana.
This is Diana Turnles, the North River victim's widow. I'm getting her statement about the last time she saw her husband alive. After that, my office.
Steels walked away quickly and passed someone. The stranger with Captain's bars who had been watching me before, he exchanged a few words with Steels, looked at me and walked off. Diana's statement was standard, mostly. Her husband had always been a crude, small-time louse of a crook, and she had been planning to file for divorce when he had suddenly changed for the better, paying court on his wife and cleaning up his act. They had been planning to get away from this hellhole and start fresh far away when Turnles had disappeared. She had been sure he had gone back to his criminal occupations and reported him missing, never expecting to see him again.
Do you have any idea what happened when your husband suddenly changed behavior, Diana? No, nothing else in our lives was different, he just turned over a new leaf. I mean, it was wonderful, except for, well, this is kind of awkward to talk about, but, he lost interest in me. You said he was very caring and doting on you. Well, he was. He just lost interest, that way. Oh, that way.
I looked back at my notes with a blush. My desk phone rang loudly, surprising me to where I about jumped out of my seat before answering the thing.
Excuse me, I have to take this.
I picked up the phone.
Detective Lane Michaels, City Homicide. Detective, it's Nathan Charles at the Mies office. I need to talk to you, in person, in private, now.
Strom's voice was on the edge of hysteria, and a hysterical dwarf is everybody else's cue to panic. This could not be good.
Yeah, I'm on my way, Nathan.
Diana looked up at me.
Is there anything else I can do?
Considering that the Winter Queen had come after her with a squad of goblins, and I was willing to bet Strom's panicked phone call had something to do with her husband's body, I had to take her with me.
You should probably come with me, Diana.
She got up and we slipped out of the precinct before Steels could see me dodging her request for a talk. As I led Diana out of the bullpen, I saw the strange captain again, before he turned away and walked into the hallway where we have our few holding cells. Eventually, I was going to have to deal with the job, but right now, I had bigger problems. Diana walked very close to me as we went into the city morgue. Strom was bouncing up and down uneasily, full of nervous energy.
You need to see what's in my, who is this? This is Diana Eternals, she's the deceased widow. She's not a widow, I think. Depends on how you classify whatever by the sacred anvils is in my exam room.
Strom beckoned us forward, and we followed. Sitting up in a chair in the Me's office, was Robert Turnles. I had seen a lot of things as a homicide detective, but one of my Vics sitting up, perfectly fine and watching me expectantly, was not one of them before now. I glanced at an exam table and Robert Turnles' body was there. The one that had washed up was still dead and decay-bloated. The one sitting in the office was pretty healthy, and looked about a decade younger than the body on the slab. Diana blinked, looked between the body of her husband, and the living much younger version of her husband, and fainted. I caught her before she could actually hit the floor, and picked her up in my arms. The Robert sitting healthy in the office was instantly out of the chair.
You get away from her, elven trash.
Strom blinked and spoke.
See, he's not a normal elf.
Considering I looked wholly human now, and the inexplicably living victim knew immediately I was an elf, I was suspicious. I placed the faint Diana on the couch.
Since you know I'm an elf, you obviously know a lot more than you should. I am Prince Tiaras of the Summer Court, and you really are.
Robert Turnles sat up straight in surprise.
Tiaras. You know me, then. I am Loro the Thar, Prince of the Spring Court.
I blinked, stunned speechless. It had been 15 years, and I had never expected to see the Dragon Prince ever again. Of course, I wasn't actually seeing him. Dragons are the only race of fairy that can't reach the mortal realm. So. I gasped. Strom had figured it out before me.
Yurian incarnation.
Loro the Thar nodded.
Robert Turnles died of a drug overdose on a fairy ring. It allowed me to cross over.
I found my voice.
That was when his personality changed, like she said, it wasn't him anymore though. Why did you come over? Something is important about Diana. The Winter Queen came for her while you were busy, doing what, exactly? Some of Robert Turnles' old acquaintances attacked me. The body was killed, it took time to build an incarnation from the model of the vessel.
I sighed.
While you were doing that, a reincarnation of one of the Morgan banished the Horned One. So the Winter Queen came personally, with the goblins that fled last night?
I looked at the unconscious Diana.
Loro the Thar, why did you come here, specifically for Diana? She must be protected, at any cost.
I looked at the woman, who was starting to move around and mutter.
Did your father tell you why? It is not my place to question the actions of the Spring King.
Diana sat up, holding her head.
Did I hit the floor? No, I caught you. There's a lot you have to know and not much time. I'm sorry, Diana, but I'm about to lay the biggest burden you could ever imagine on you.
Loro the Thar sat up stiffly, watching Diana with an unreadable expression. She stared at him and shook her head.
I think I'm ready for the whole picture.
I took a deep breath and started talking.
I'm going to lay out what I think happened, mostly, and you correct if anything is wrong, Prince Loro the Thar.
He watched quietly, while moving closer to Diana. Was it possible for a dragon to love a human, or was he influenced by the components of Robert Turnles from both vessel and incarnation?
It all started 15 years ago. The 7th Winter Queen arranged for Danny Lawrence's kidnapping, and you and I helped Ted Lawrence rescue his daughter and return home. Now, they tried again, sending the wild hunt led by the Horned One to get her. They failed, because Danny had good protection around here, and we were able to figure out what she is. She manifested her power as the goddess Nemane, one of the Morgan, and banished him from the mortal realm.
I paused and continued.
Now, I believe Diana is the second part of the Morgan. Either bad or Maka, it's too early to make a certain conclusion. You were sent, Loro the Thar, to protect her from the Winter Queen, but the Queen was focusing on Danny, and only went after Diana after you were out of the picture, temporarily as it turned out. That about right?
Loro the Thar bowed.
Your theory seems very true, Prince Tiaras. I would welcome your help to protect Diana.
I nodded. Great, I had 2 ancient goddesses to protect. But I had backup in the form of Loro the Thar, which would only help, except for the fact that he was operating in a human form.
Come on, both of you. Loro the Thar.
The Dragon Prince interrupted me.
Loro, would be acceptable.
I nodded.
Can you change your incarnation's appearance? Robert Turnles is good and dead.
Loro changed his form, subtly altering it so in a moment or two he no longer looked like Diana's dead husband.
Is this acceptable? Yeah. Thanks for the call, Strom.
The dwarf nodded and walked us out. I kept Loro and Diana with me as I went back to the precinct. Miraculously, I dodged Steels and Jameson.
You two, stay here by my desk. If anybody asks, Loro is your brother, come into town after you called him about your husband's death.
When they acknowledged me, I went to Steele's office.
Michaels, there you are. Switchboard said you got a call from the morgue. The widow's brother came to the morgue, Nathan Charles called me to handle it. Mrs. Turnles and her brother are here at my desk. After you get your plate clear,
she was interrupted by the door opening behind us. It was the stranger with Captain's bars.
I'd like to have an in-depth talk with you about your future, Detective Michaels. Name's Captain Lombardi, from Special Investigations upstairs.
I was wary of this. Special Investigations were a bunch of kooks, according to the entire rest of the department, who spent their time chasing after things that I knew existed but were so incompetent at it that the shaded world didn't even pay attention to them.
What exactly does Special Investigations do, Captain?
Lombardi smiled.
We handle cases of an odd nature, Detective. The kind of things that most people laugh off.
I smiled and nodded. SI were fumbling idiots, and I wanted nothing to do with them.
As amazing an assignment as that sounds like it would be, I'm happy in homicide, sir. I'm slated to go to narcotics 2 months from now. I have a friend over there that's excited to partner with me again. I'm not really interested in SI, Captain.
Lombardi raised his hands in an accepting gesture.
Whatever you say, I don't want anybody in Special Investigations that doesn't want to be there, Detective. If you change your mind, we're on the 2nd floor.
He left the office after an air kiss at Steele's. She glared.
Creep. If I'd realized he was trying to recruit one of my detectives for that SI nut house, I wouldn't have bothered having you talk to him, Michaels. Keep handling the Turnell and DeGaulle murders. That's all.
I smiled my way out of her office. Jameson waylaid me on the way to my desk.
What did that SI nut job say? Offered me a job, I turned him down, told him I was anticipating narcotics in 2 months.
Jameson nodded.
Good call. What's that guy's name again? Lombardi. He's the captain of SI.
Diana and Loro walked up to us.
Excuse me.
He smiled at her.
You're Mrs. Turnell, and her brother.
Loro the Thar was not smooth, but he stumbled along.
Loro Turnell.
Jameson blinked. I wanted to facepalm.
He's the victim's brother, Sergeant. I'm going 10:59 them home, put them somewhere safe, in case there's any danger from Turnell's killer.
Which was true, in a manner of speaking. I wasn't taking them back to Diana's house. Jameson watched me leave as I was herding them away.
Come back down here after they're safe.
I waved over my head.
10-4, Jameson.
We were out the precinct door when Lombardi seemed to appear on the sidewalk.
You wouldn't have this problem if you worked for me, Detective.
I was herding Loro and Diana to the Gran Torino, to take them straight to Damien.
What problem would that be, Captain? Hiding things, trying to deal with things beyond most people's grasp while mundanities pester at you. Yeah, sure, it's a pain in the ass. If you'll excuse me, sir, I have to take Mrs. Turnell and her brother-in-law home. They're dealing with a significant loss.
All of us were in the car, and I was out of there. Lombardi made me uncomfortable, and I had to wonder if SI were as blind as the shaded world thought they were. Damien Van Walliver was, all things considered, more pleasant about me bringing Diana Turnell and Loro the Thar to him than I would have thought. Disraeli was reading with Denny, while they were having erudite discussions of the collected works of Shakespeare. Damien clapped his hands for attention and gestured to Diana and Loro.
Everybody, this is Diana Turnell, and Loro the Thar of the Spring Court. They had the Winter Queen herself leading the goblins to get Diana.
Ted introduced himself, stumbling over words.
I'm Ted Lawrence, that's my daughter Denny, and I think we have the same problem. Fairies trying to kill us.
Damien took control of the room.
Now, what exactly happened with the Turnells?
I started explaining.
As far I can tell, Diana is somehow of importance to the Winter Court. After Danny banished the Horned One, the Queen was forced to do this herself. Knowing about this, the Spring King had his son Loro the Thar step in and vessel Robert Turnells after he had died of a drug overdose. This arrangement worked to keep the fairies away until Robert Turnell's physical body was killed again, and washed up in the river. Loro the Thar was forced to take the time to construct an incarnation, and that gap of protection allowed the Winter Queen to go after Diana Turnells. Luckily for Diana, I was there when the goblins attacked and swept her out of there. We went to the precinct, and after some things there, we came here.
Damien offered Diana his arm.
My lady, you must be exhausted having so much happen in so little time, allow me to show you to my kitchen. Food.
Danny got up and Disraeli trotted along with her, just as interested in the concept of food. As Damien handed his guests off to a maid, he looked at me.
Are you joining us for dinner, Tiaras? I have to go back to the precinct, it sucks donkey dick, but it is what it is.
I paused for a minute, about to walk to the foyer, when I had to ask a question.
Do you know anything about a Captain Lombardi? Apparently he heads Special Investigations.
Damien nodded and pulled a book from the study shelves.
Chester Lombardi came to me for consultations on incidents involving the strange and unusual. Generally, when I could tell there was Fae involvement, I told him to pull his people back and tread carefully with the fair folk. After the disappearance of two SI detectives, he started to listen to me that the Fae are unholy dicks. They're playing in territory they don't understand, they could use someone like you, Tiaras. Yeah, probably. Lombardi knows something, he's trying to get his hands on me.
Damien shoved the book back on the shelf.
He came to me, about 6 months ago after the Pixies' effort to take over the mortal realm. He desperately wanted someone of a special nature for his unit.
I gave the sorcerer a hateful glare.
You told him about me? Not in so many words, I merely told him that a detective who serves Lieutenant Steele and Sergeant Jameson should be looked at as something rather unusual. Anything else he noticed to narrow it down to you was on you, detective. Jackass.
I had to leave, and hope I could get away from the precinct soon after returning.
I'll be back tomorrow evening. Ted burned up all my iron bullets during the Horned One's attack on us here. I need to stop by my house.
I flicked off the Torino's engine and walked back to the precinct. Lombardi was, swear to God, waiting for me in the parking lot, leaning on a meter and looking perfectly put together.
Drop them off somewhere safe, hey. They're very safe. That's what Van Walliver said.
As much as I'd like to, I couldn't murder Damien in cold blood. How much did he tell Captain Lombardi?
They'll be safe there. Is she? Is who what? Diana Turnells. Is she one of the Morgan?
Must murder Damien in cold blood.
There's no way to know that without closer studies and how she interacts with Denny.
I brushed past Lombardi, he followed me.
Special Investigations needs someone like you, detective. I'm dealing with crimes I don't even understand, against things that can't even be seen by most of my detectives and officers.
I rolled my eyes.
Go find a wizard in the phone book, I'm not interested.
Lombardi watched me walk away, I could feel his eyes on my back as I took the steps in twos and went back to homicide to find Jameson.
Michaels. Hey, dude.
I was straightening my desk.
The Turnell's safe. Safe as they can be. There's some SI shit going on, isn't there?
I didn't answer him. Lombardi crossed the bullpen, watching me every step of the way as he went up to Steele's door and knocked. Jameson didn't press.
Go home, or Van Walliver's, whichever.
I did what I was told and gladly. In the driveway, I shut off the Torino's engine and got out. I wanted to sleep in my house tonight, badly, but the stakes were simply too high. I couldn't bring two potential goddesses reincarnated, drop them in his lap, and then pretend that the affairs of my own past weren't calling for reckoning. I comforted myself with the mental image of Damien's full staff of household servants as I dragged myself into the house and got more iron bullets from my bedroom. I locked a clip into the service pistol and was about to turn around when I heard a familiar voice at my back. It was warm as summer, sweet as honey, and lethal as a black mamba's bite.
Tiaras, my son and heir.
I turned slowly to face my mother, standing imperiously at 5.5 feet with long white hair, pointed ears, and an arrogant expression.
What a surprise, you haven't called me your son in 15 years, and haven't called me your heir in, well, ever. Your older sister is ill. My heart weeps, your majesty.
I stretched my arm out, pointing the gun at the floor. I wasn't that hostile yet, and racking the bolt to chamber around.
You have truly become just like them.
The Summer Queen gestured contemptuously in a fashion that clearly included the entire human race.
Not exactly. The bullets are iron, you high-handed bitch.
I hadn't realized until now that I still had 15 years of hatred for my mother bottled up inside. 30, if you were really honest. The Queen bridled from the threat.
Enough of this. I have a deal for you. I'm barely listening. Join your proper side. The Morgan cannot be allowed to stand again. Join me and our cousin the Lady of Winter, and I will pardon you of your banishment, even allow you a free hand to choose your bride. With your approval of her, of course, your majesty.
I turned away from her and walked out of the bedroom.
I'm not interested. 15 years is far too long for you to just drop in and try to be a good mother. I'm going to make sure the Morgan is restored, so Faye like you actually have someone who can beat their ass for being the biggest jerks in the 5 dimensions.
I had hit a nerve. She stiffened and her eyes all but bored holes in me.
Faye like me? You ungrateful little wretch. You are Faye. Barely. Now get out before I shoot you with something you won't get up from.
I raised my gun and flicked the safety off. I wasn't sure if I could pull the trigger or not, but she didn't know that. The Summer Queen hissed and walked out. I didn't lower my gun until the door slammed. Then something hit me. She had walked. My mother wasn't incarnating, she was here. I checked my gun, and headed out after her. Of course, she was gone. The Winter and Summer Queens were both here, and apparently united on the only thing that could inspire fairies and elves to unite. I turned off my car in Damien Van Wallever's driveway. Far as I could tell, things were quiet, and lights were on here and there on the facade. The moment I walked in the door, Danny pounced.
We're having so much fun, me and Diana can do all sorts of cool stuff together.
Diana was a lot more subdued as she walked out of the study towards Danny and me.
You've been gone a while. I had to deal with some things at work. Got a captain panting after me for his unit.
Damien was smiling when he entered the foyer.
Detective.
He needed to know.
My mother is here. Here. As in, physically here. She confronted me at my house when I went home to get more iron bullets. I wasn't expecting you back tonight.
I shrugged.
Figured it was a little wrong to dump this situation on you and crawl off to my bed.
Damien waved us back to the study.
This is crazy.
Damien gave Ted a "you poor, dumb fool" look.
It's our only option. As long as Danny and Diana are in the mortal realm, the Shaded are going to keep coming after them, and they have only a small fraction of their true power. We cast a portal, take them to Fairy, and install them to the thrones in the Temple of the Morgan. They'll be all but invincible. I'm not letting my daughter go back to Fairy, and that's final.
I interrupted the argument. Diana and Laura were sitting close together, her hand in his. She'd get a rude surprise if we went through with Damien's plan, and she saw her protector was a 5-ton dragon.
It's our only option, Ted. Do you have any idea how hard it was to get to Fairy the first time?
Damien was unruffled. I have never seen this guy ruffled, ever.
With my magic, it will be much easier, and with the queens here instead of in Fairy, it'll be that much easier. Danny is not going back to Fairy, I barely got her out last time. And you're not talking about just dropping in, you're talking about leaving her there.
I gritted my teeth.
You can stay with her in Fairy, she'll still need your protection. But if you and her stay here, you are just walking targets.
Diana spoke up. Considering my biggest problem was the Lawrences, I had kind of ignored Loro and Diana.
So you're saying if we go to magical fairyland, everything will be fine?
Loro looked to Diana.
There are no guarantees, but in fairy you would have access to great power and my full ability to help you. Full ability. Right now, I am limited by a human incarnation. In fairy, I am prince of the spring court, a lord and ruler among the dragons. I can devote near limitless power and forces to protect you, Diana.
And what did Diana take out of that entire speech? You guessed it.
You're a dragon.
Loro blinked, as if he had never imagined she'd lock on to that tidbit.
Yes, I am a prince, son of the Spring King and his chosen queen. Someday, I shall rule over all that the dragons claim.
As amused as I was, I stepped in to control the conversation.
Loro the Thar is a dragon, but the friendly, good, intelligent sort of dragon. I'm actually an elf, though it's complicated. Digirelli over there is an incubus, and Damien is a sorcerer. You're in a world of unlimited wonders and unparalleled dangers, Diana.
Ted had listened to my speech, and Danny had walked up behind her father and squeezed between him and a marble pillar supporting the high ceiling in Damien's foyer. Damien walked off to the study then, beckoning everyone to follow.
I have to grab one of my books, it's a reference on dimensional portals. Casting a portal is relatively straightforward, but the preparatory requirements are, shall we say, extensive.
I winced, knowing what a sorcerer means by the word extensive.
So we run all over hell and creation to find the ingredients and components to cast a portal to fairy. Wonderful.
Damien nodded ruefully as he entered his study and grabbed a book off the shelves groaning with books. Digirelli scrambled up to get a better look at the book Damien had picked.
Portals and Interdimensional Travel, an introductory textual reference. Just the title would put me to sleep.
Damien opened the book and rapidly flipped to the section on fairy.
Maybe, but it's also a very practical reference to portal casting, as well as a neat traveler's guide. What can I say, Argentius Antoron was a wanderer, and he wrote for a 1800s travel magazine too. Fey portals, fairy circles, fairy forts, invocations, Alcywort, the first rose of spring, blood of an untouched maiden, blood of a willing fey, most of this we can get relatively quickly.
I rolled my eyes.
Relatively quickly, he says.
Loro spoke.
We must start at once.
Digirelli pointed outside, beyond the thick glass of Damien's Harbor View study windows. It was black out, with only a little bit of grey at the western horizon.
Would you rethink that statement, Loro the Thar? We won't accomplish anything stumbling around in the dark, with almost any contact we would need a sleep.
My ringing cell phone interrupted the conversation. I grabbed it off my belt and waved myself away as I went back to the foyer. It could be police business, though I prayed it wasn't.
Detective Michaels here. Tiaras, it's Leah de Gaulle. I know it's very late and you're probably tired, but you dealt quite a bit with my sister Lunara. She spoke of you often. I feel I do know you. It's probably not right to call you by your first name like that. It's all right, Ms. de Gaulle. Calling me Tiaras is fine. I don't really expect anyone to address me royally. Well, Digi, but he does it to be a nit.
What did she want? I knew that the de Gaulle sisters were both witches, and powerful ones. But she had given Digirelli the Star Rock, so she knew something.
Tiaras, then. I've been going through some things. The crime scene people released my sister's shop, and I have professionals coming to clean. There was something she put aside for you, that you had requested.
What was the last thing I had asked Lunara de Gaulle to get? It had been months ago. Oh, damn, I remember.
We're taking about the thing in the bottle. Yes, that thing. Will you still take delivery of the thing? I'll be there shortly. You're at the shop.
My heart was starting to race. If my package had come in, we might not have to cut Danny and slash or inadvertently force her to admit she wasn't untouched.
I'm in my sister's shop, still deciding if I want to run it in her place. She would like that, Ms. de Gaulle. Leah, please. Leah, then. I'll be there in about 30 minutes.
I hung up the cell phone and looked at the group. It was pretty clear everybody had been straining themselves to hear. Digirelli perked up.
What thing does Leah have for you? What did you have Lunara acquire? Something that could be really valuable right now.
I dodged any other questions as I went back out into the oncoming night. The city was dark and cold once the last of the sunlight was gone. I pulled my jacket tighter and shifted my gun to be more reachable as I parked across from the little storefront that Lunara had once ran her business from. I hoped Leah would stay and continue. There's fewer and fewer shops of unique supplies available nowadays for true magic. I was ready to pull my gun, tense and alone in an area where a friend had been killed indirectly because of me. But all of this would have happened whether I was involved or not, unless one accepted that Ted would not have succeeded without my involvement. Telling myself that Lunara's death wasn't my fault, I walked up the shop and pushed the door open. The bells rattled on the door, a simple warning device for humans, and they were dark metal, slightly rusted. Iron, and anyone coming in the door would have to brush up against them.
Leah. You here?
The storefront was dark, but the workshop in back had its lights on.
I'm here, Your Highness.
Leah came out just enough to be seen and waved me back.
Tiaras is fine, really, Leah. I'm sorry, but it doesn't feel right. You are a prince. Exiled prince. The thing, it's good and intact. Yes.
Leah ducked through the curtain and I followed her. She reached for the top of the shelves as I let the curtain fall behind me. Taking down a mason jar, Leah tucked it to her body and turned to me. The liquid inside didn't shift much, but was still liquid and glinting silver even in the low workshop light.
It was freely given, you're sure? A young elven woman in need of gold for an excursion across the mortal realm gave it to Lunara, freely and willingly.
Leah handed the jar to me. I couldn't help but turn the sealed jar a little, watching as the silver liquid coated some of the upper glass of the jar, shimmering more as it slowly flowed back down. Elven blood tends to be very viscous, and the woman had obviously been dehydrated when she had given blood, probably still figuring out what she could eat and drink over here. I set the jar on the counter, and gestured outside.
I have some gold in the trunk of the Gran Torino, real, not fairy gold.
Leah shook her head.
You don't have to worry about it, just promise me you'll catch Lunara's killer. I'll pay you the gold. The horned one was banished by one of my little party, the details would put you in harm's way. He's paid as much as he ever will for your sister's murder.
Leah nodded, knowing that the Fae always play fast and loose with human lives. Deep down, I knew I wasn't any different. I walked out of her shop, careful about crossing the late-night street, and unlocked my car's trunk. The gold was hidden way back, behind just behind and under and a few other things. I pulled the bag out and was unobtrusive with it as possible as I walked back to Leah's shop. She had wrapped the jar of blood in black paper and bagged it as I counted out more than enough gold. She recounted the elven coins.
This is too much, here.
She tried to shove about 15 coins back at me. I held my hands away.
That's what I'm paying you.
I took the bag, and repressed the desire to be insulted as she brushed a bar of raw-cold iron over and across and on all the coins.
I refuse to be insulted by your distrust.
She grinned at me and quickly brushed the coins into a bag.
Thank you, for what it's worth. If there's anything else I can do. We won't hesitate, Leah. Right now Damien Van Walliver is drawn into our situation.
She snorted. Witches hate sorcerers and the feeling is mutual.
Can you trust him? Far as I can throw him, anyway.
I tucked the blood carefully into my jacket and headed back out into the chilly night. It was only a half-dozen yards across the street. I was halfway there when a heavy old Cadillac slowed down and stopped, its headlights illuminating the quiet street. My gun hand itched as the Cadillac's door opened and a tall man stepped out. Me and my car were clearly illuminated in the headlights. The man read my plates first, so I knew what he probably did, and I was certain when he spoke.
Thought that was you, detective.
Captain Lombardi got back into the Cadillac and parked it behind me, so close I would have been caught if I wasn't in the last parallel on that side of the street before the intersection.
Captain, fancy seeing you here this late. Same here. You needed something from Ms. de Gaulle.
It was not a question. I unlocked my door and tried to set the bag carefully between the seats without it being obvious I was placing something.
Just a courtesy visit, her sister was murdered. I know that, and I also know that she called you while you were at the Van Walliver mansion, and had something Lunara obtained for you.
I was getting irritated with this human prying into things he didn't understand, police captain or not.
With all due respect, Captain, please get out of my business. I think SI is a joke, you and your people are playing in a realm you don't understand, and the things I would have to do to make you see what you're blindly sticking your noses into would disgust you and probably break the minds of at least a few of your officers.
I got in the Torino and started her up. As I was about to shift into drive and peel off, I heard Lombardi clearly in the dark.
What's the elf blood for?
That made me yank my hand away from the shifter.
What elf blood? If you're thinking I'm buying some new sort of street drug. Whatever you're doing with that, it's wrong. How do you know it was given willingly?
He was propped up on my car, and my windows were still down.
Because if it wasn't it would have clotted in the jar and turned to a sticky grey-black mess.
I reached for the window handle.
And I don't consider it wrong, I know the Fae too well for that. Oh.
Lombardi had his momentary moral indignation checked.
Oh yes. The Fae are morally bankrupt. Nothing could be done to an elf or fairy that they don't deserve.
Lombardi tilted his head and looked at me over his horn-rimmed glasses.
Wow, that's a point of view. Self-loathing much? So you would be completely cool with it if somebody took a blade to you to get blood, detective?
I shrugged and turned the Gran Torino's engine off.
Wouldn't do any good, I'm basically human now. Show me.
Lombardi wanted to play the blood game? Okay, two can do that. I popped my glove box and pulled out the other cold iron knife I keep accessible. One in the home, one in the car. I turned the knife to and fro to show it to him.
As you see, it is iron, it's hand-forged and hammered, worked cold. Lethal injuries to the Fae.
I pulled my sleeve back to show where I had bandaged the other out when I was arguing with Digi.
You a cutter. Long story.
I flipped the knife and quickly cut myself, shallower than before. Lombardi flinched when I actually did it and laid the knife across my lap, then smeared the flowing blood with my fingers and reached a hand out the window.
See, Red. I'm mostly human by now. Still, you would be completely cool with somebody just randomly doing something to you? Killing you, whatever.
I started the Gran Torino back up.
I deserve it, Captain.
I didn't look back as I pulled away. End of chapter.